your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. Thanks for joining us for a look at what made headlines this past week. A former Lethbridge police inspector has pled guilty to breach of trust while he worked at the Domestic Violence Action Center. Bill Kay appeared in Lethbridge Provincial Court Tuesday to make the plea, admitting to a non-consensual sexual relationship with a young woman who had come to him for help. The charge stems from a 2021 complaint by the woman who was Kay's client and a former victim of domestic abuse. The woman claimed Kay initiated an unwelcome sexual relationship with him between December 2017 and April 2018, when the woman was 23 years old and he was 58. The woman claimed Lethbridge Police Service did not take her complaint seriously, so she went to the RCMP, which resulted in charges being laid against Kay for breach of trust, sexual assault, and criminal harassment. As part of Kay's guilty plea to the breach of trust charge, all other charges have now been dropped. On Tuesday, in his statement of facts, Kay admitted to the court that his relationship with the woman had been non-consensual. He apologized to his wife, family, friends, and the Lethbridge Police Service, where he had worked for 35 years, prior to becoming a victim advocate and board member at Chinook Sexual Assault Center. According to a statement sent to BCN, the victim, who could not be named, says, quote, "When I made the decision to come forward and report the crimes committed against me, I set out to ensure no other person would be harmed the way I had been. There is no win or loss here. To me, it's simple. It's about ethics, integrity, and safety. That was missing, and I sought to begin to repair that." On Tuesday, a judge sentenced Kay to house arrest for 12 months, followed by a reintroduction into the community with a 12-month curfew. In other news, many people have been scammed through voicemail, text, email, and phone calls. So how can you protect yourself from these fraudsters? Lethbridge Police hosted a town hall at Lakeview Elementary School on Wednesday night, warning South Lethbridge residents about traps that scammers set up. BCN's Heidi Echeverria was there and has the details.
Fraud and fraud prevention. It was the topic discussed on the town hall that Lethbridge Police Service had on Wednesday night. To educate the community as a way to prevent fraud, LPS has been holding town hall meetings at different locations throughout the city. This time, the Southside community voiced their question and concern about fraud and its different forms. Sergeant Kevin Talbot, Economic Crimes Unit with LPS, explained why this town hall meeting is important.
When we are seeing an increase, a pocket of frauds that are coming across our desk, we'll notify the public of what those frauds are and how to protect themselves. For example, grandparent scams, if we're seeing a rash of those, we'll notify the public that it's going on in our community, and some tips on how to protect themselves from those things. Most of us have probably have had someone try to defraud us by a phone call, a text message, or an email, or something of that nature. Or we've been victimized ourselves. When it comes to reporting to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, though, only about 5% are actually reported. There's a few reasons for that. One is when people are victimized by fraud, sometimes they're embarrassed to report it. Sometimes they think the police can't do anything for them.
According to Sergeant Talbot, scammers want money or information. He also said the most common scams are computer fixing, Canada Revenue Agency, emergency or grandparent, phishing, lottery, extortion, romance, investment, and artificial intelligence. Talbot explained how this works and what LPS does when it comes to fraud.
Computer fixing scams, so you get a pop-up on your computer screen that asks you to call a number or push a button or a link in order to fix your computer. Canada Revenue Agency, either you haven't paid your taxes or they claim you've got a warrant for your arrest. Phishing is kind of applied to every scam, and this is basically when the scammers are throwing out information on a text message to anybody that will respond to them. Lottery scams, the scammers will contact you claiming that you've won a prize and you got to pay some taxes or some fees in order to get your prize. So what is the LPS doing when it comes to frauds? Well, we're training our individuals internally and in external resources. So we just recently sent one of our investigators to Ottawa to a CPC investigations course on fraud. If someone tells you to lie about it while you're sending money, it's a scam. If someone tells you to keep it a secret, it's a scam as well. If you've experienced being victimized yourself, spread the word to everyone. And eventually everybody will be informed on how to protect themselves.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
Up next, it's the anniversary of the Hamas attack on Israel, which prompted a year-long war. Plus, Canada is facing a family physician shortage, but what's being done about it? It turns out Canadian senators have been doctoring up a plan. That and more after the break. Today is the one-year anniversary of the terrorist attack by Hamas in southern Israel that claimed around 1,200 lives. Close to 100 hostages have been taken by Hamas that have still not been released. TBN Israel correspondent Yair Pinto says October 7th is a day the people of Israel will never forget. He also says it's been amazing to see how many countries have supported Israel in their fight against terrorism.
To see such unity, I mean, people from different backgrounds that are from the left side of the political view to the right side, to Orthodox, to seculars, all uniting together in defending Israel, because I think everybody realized that we are fighting for our life.
Yes,
and the enemy
we
doesn't care if you vote Netanyahu or if you vote someone else.
Yeah.
So they just wanted to kill everybody. And just to make a point of that, many of the communities adjacent to the Gaza Strip were actually super extreme left peace advocates with the Palestinians. And Hamas terrorists didn't care. And they slaughtered them, kidnapped them just the same.
Meanwhile, a plane carrying crucial medical aid from UN agencies landed in Lebanon as the fighting between Israel and the terrorist group Hezbollah intensifies.
This is a shipment that has been organized by the WHO and UNHCR and supported by the United Arab Emirates. It contains 40 tons of medical supplies, mainly trauma kits, that will be crucial to support the hospitals as they receive the casualties from the Israeli attacks on Lebanon.
Closer to home, a new report released by Canadian senators has outlined how Canada can increase the supply of family doctors in our country. Independent Ontario Senator Ratna Ammivar says Canada is facing a primary care crisis and something needs to be done by the federal government to address the physician shortage ASAP. She says their report has a solid recommendation or two.
An alarming 6.5 million Canadians do not have access to a family doctor, a number that is projected to rise to 10 million within the next decade. We find ourselves lagging behind our international counterparts, ranking last among 10 high-income countries when it comes to access for primary care. The solutions tap into the talent of those Canadians who were trained overseas in medical schools or those immigrants who came to Canada with medical degrees and even experience.
And speaking of healthcare, the Alberta government says it's taking action to improve healthcare in rural and remote communities in the province. That includes the introduction of a $16 million rural and remote family medicine resident physician bursary pilot program. Health Minister Adriana LaGrange says this initiative will allow better access to medical services in our regions.
So this 3-year plan will guide government's efforts in improving rural and remote health care and closing the gap between Albertans' care in urban centres and in surrounding areas, and making sure that they get the care that they need in rural and remote communities. So it's really emphasizing the rural, remote communities having the care that they need. And through this action plan, there will be key focuses. One being access, another being community care, the third being prevention and wellness, the fourth being workforce, and the other key area is the fifth, which is creating innovative care models and solutions that serve the unique needs in rural and remote communities.
LaGrange says the province is also implementing 2 grant programs to attract and retain more paramedics for rural First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities. Meantime, a healthcare town hall was held by NDP leader Naheed Nenshi and Shadow Minister for Health Sarah Hoffman, who were in Lethbridge Tuesday night at the Galt Museum. The Alberta NDP has been very critical of the UCP over their healthcare policies, and residents in our city got to voice their concerns. BCN's Landon Hickok was there and has more on the issues.
Lethbridge got to hear direct answers from the top of Alberta's opposition party on Tuesday night, as Alberta NDP members, leader Naheed Nenshi, Shadow Minister for Health Sarah Hoffman, and MLA Dr. Luann Metz overheard testimonies and answered questions from residents on the topic of healthcare. In the shadow of an upcoming Lethbridge West by-election soon to be called, some residents of Lethbridge are voting on the basis of the city's current health challenges, some with challenges of their own.
I am so grateful that so many people came out today and that so many people with real lived experience came out and were willing to share their stories. I mean, it was heartbreaking to hear of people living in chronic pain, waiting for surgery, people unable to work, people who have been made even more ill because the system was not there for them. And the fact that so many people are waiting for a family doc. And right now there are 0 family doctors accepting new patients in Lethbridge. So I'm really grateful for it because it's important for me to hear these stories so that we can amplify them and try and make the system better.
Other issues brought up were a lack of funding, facilities, and high wait times. Lethbridge, a hub of southern Alberta with a large regional hospital, is heavily relied on by many rural residents, as emergency services in smaller communities are forced to close on occasion due to staffing shortages.
Telling somebody that you need to drive when public health care includes making sure that every person in the public can be able to access the services that they need, and it should be the right care in the right place at the right time.
In response to Premier Daniel Smith's announcement on the restructuring of Alberta Health Services, Sarah Hoffman says this could cause even more healthcare workers to walk out.
What she is proposing at this point is massive system overhaul. She knows it's not working. That's why they're adding another system to try to talk about implementation and accountability, because there's already so much chaos just with the piece that they've done around Recovery Alberta. We're losing nurses, we're losing other healthcare professionals because they don't want to be part of another chaotic reorg or redraw of the system. We saw what happened with the privatization of labs when they stopped the building of the public lab that we were doing as a province. Then they decided to sell everything off to Dynalife. Then they had to buy back what they'd already sold from Dynalife and pay them more, and it caused chaos for patients. We know how the wait lists were incredible and unacceptable for lab results, and so much begins with getting that information.
For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
Make sure to catch the full interviews with Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi and Shadow Health Minister Sarah Hoffman on our website at bridgecitynews.ca. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith took to social media this week to discuss some of the changes her government will be moving forward when it comes to what she calls protecting future choices of children. In a Facebook post, she says some of that protection includes licensed doctors being prohibited from performing gender reassignment surgery on youth under 18 in Alberta. Puberty blockers and hormone therapy would also not be allowed for those under 16 unless already under treatment. Those who are born biologically male will not be allowed to compete in girls' or women's sports. Parental opt-in is required when a teacher wishes to discuss gender identity, sexual orientation, or human sexuality. Parental notification is required for a teacher or staff member to change a name or pronoun of a student or use it at school. And 16 and 17-year-olds can make the choice on pronouns and gender identity, but parental notification will still be required. The province is also looking at tweaking the Alberta Bill of Rights. According to our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson, it will include strengthening firearm and property rights. He says this will offer the government a playbook which it can use in the future. In this next interview with BCN's Hal Roberts, Dawson also discusses if the government officials are considering increasing Alberta's $15 an hour minimum wage.
There's been a lot of chatter about sort of what might be going into this, and those do seem to be the three sort of large pillars. There's certainly the three things that the provincial government wants people to know about at this point. Could there be some other stuff in there that we don't know about when the legislation's actually tabled? That's certainly a possibility. But those are the big three things that the government has been talking about at this moment. And so let's assume whatever changes they bring in, proposals they make, become part of the Bill of Rights. Then we get into a really interesting question of, well, what does this do? Because the Alberta Bill of Rights, it's not really a constitutional document. It's a statute. It's a law. It could be modified, as we're seeing, at any time by any government if they so choose, and it only applies in Alberta. So what this really will mean, probably, is that there will be a new way for sort of legal activists to try and go to the courts to effect change on Alberta law. And that, I think, is really important, because you could not ever have used, and you could not use even with these changes, the Alberta Bill of Rights to go after some sort of federal legislation. So the firearms example is a really good one. There's the rules around firearm use are often criminal code provisions, Firearms Act provisions, and things like that. And the Alberta Bill of Rights could not be used to affect any of the federal rules around it. Same for a vaccine mandate in the Canadian Armed Forces. That's a federal thing. The Alberta Bill of Rights probably would not apply there. So it's going to be very interesting to see practically what this means, because it hasn't really been used in a very long time. There are some cases from sort of the 70s, before the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that the Alberta Bill of Rights was considered. But it's not really been a big part of the legal landscape since. So it's going to be very interesting to see, all these groups that make their living going to court over stuff, they're going to have a new tool. And the Alberta government as well is going to have a new sort of guideline or guidebook, shall we say, on legislation that it has, that it is writing to try and sort of slot into. So it's really, really interesting. I'm fascinated by the legal side of it as much as the political considerations that are obviously going into things like medical treatment, firearms rights, and property rights, which I think it's fair to say are probably more a concern for UCP supporters than perhaps NDP voters in this province.
Now, what I think is really interesting with tweaking the Alberta Bill of Rights as well, Tyler, is the protections against compulsory medical treatment. Now, wouldn't that also impact people who are forced into treatment when it comes to their drug addiction, the intervention? Because that's medical treatment, is it not?
It certainly is, yeah. And the government has not really been put on the spot and forced to explain how it thinks these sorts of things are going to work. And there's other examples too. I mean, the classic example is religious groups that don't accept blood transfusions, and governments occasionally get into fights with parents in the case of a minor. And there was a case in Ontario maybe 10 years ago now of a young Indigenous woman who did not want to continue receiving chemotherapy and chose instead to pursue traditional Indigenous medicine. So there are, I think a lot of the motivation behind this is obviously related to the COVID-19 vaccine mandates and people who were compelled through their jobs, if they wanted to keep their jobs, to become vaccinated. But you're right, it raises a whole host of other issues. And so it'll be very interesting to see how the Bill of Rights is written to try and maybe avoid some of those, or if it's written in a less precise fashion, then maybe all this stuff will end up in court.
Alberta's minimum wage, Tyler, has been stuck at $15 an hour for 6 years now. It's one of the lowest minimum wage rates in the entire nation. And I mean, if it had to keep up with inflation, it would be, I think, closer to $19 an hour right now. Any talk of the province potentially beefing up our minimum wage?
Oh, but not really. The Alberta Federation of Labor has been sort of banging the gong a little bit about this, trying to raise some awareness of it. And as you say, it's among the lowest. I think Saskatchewan and Alberta will be at $15, which will be the absolute lowest in the country. I think BC is the highest, followed by Quebec, which probably isn't that surprising in the scheme of Canada's sort of political makeup. But no, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest from the government in changing this. And their argument is basically, well, look at our income tax structure, which is much more beneficial to low wage earners than anywhere else in the country, which is true, because that first sort of bracket in Alberta where you don't get taxed is, I think it's about $25,000, whereas other provinces are more like $9,000 or $10,000. So that is true. And they've also said that there's impacts on this for small business. If a small business has to up everyone's wages, then that's going to cause problems. Those costs will will be passed on to the consumer, and so on and so forth. So, whether any of these arguments are good arguments is perhaps beside the point for the folks who are making $15 an hour and looking for a little bit more. But no, there doesn't seem to be all that much appetite at this point to change that. And so I guess we'll see what Saskatchewan does. Maybe we'll end up being the lowest.
Well, my son is one of them making minimum wage right now, and I got to tell you, he's finding it very hard to get ahead. He's our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson. Thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
Always a pleasure, Hal.
A new poll says most Canadians oppose the federal government's plan of banning new gas and diesel vehicles by the year 2035. The survey done by Leger says almost 60% of Canadians do not agree with the direction the Trudeau government is taking. Franco Tarazano is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, and he says most Canadians just don't like the idea at all.
We commissioned a Leger poll that shows that almost 6 in 10 Canadians oppose this ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035 coming from the Trudeau government. This may be one of the costliest and worst thought out policies from the Trudeau government, and that is saying a lot. And we've got the poll numbers to show that Canadians think the government is way off base. Because guess what? Canadians want to be able to buy gas-powered minivans or diesel-powered work trucks going into the future. And you know what? Canadians also know that this will come with a huge price tag. So buckle up, get ready for your tax bill and power bills to go up if the Trudeau government goes through with this ban, right? Think about all the costs that will come with this ban, including the subsidies, the charging stations, the infrastructure costs. So we're calling at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we're calling on the Trudeau government to listen to Canadians, to take this poll as a wake-up call, and to get rid of this ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035.
And one of the biggest ongoing concerns for Canadians is having a reliable and affordable power supply. But we're told one potential solution that's getting a lot of attention worldwide is hydrogen. And Alberta happens to be a leader in hydrogen production, according to Alberta's Minister of Affordability and Utilities. Here is BCN's Hal Roberts with MLA Nathan Newdorf.
We have so much technology from our oil and gas sector. They are global leaders already. And Alberta's production of hydrogen is over 2 million cubic tons per year already. The entire United States is just over 10 million. So we're a huge player globally. We have the technology, we have the resources, we continue to advance and stay at the forefront of a tremendously exciting new technology and growth industry.
Now, hydrogen obviously is a gas. How would you calm the fears of some of our viewers thinking, well, is this dangerous, working with hydrogen?
Of course, there's many of us older folks who remember the Hindenburg and some of those kind of things. Technology continues to advance. The temperature, as I understand it, the temperature of shipping, if it's very, very cold, much more stable, all of those kind of things. We continue to work with industry to make sure that we have the best, safest, lowest cost technology to make sure that these issues aren't feared or aren't dangerous to everybody where they're utilized.
So you feel that Alberta can become a global leader when it comes to hydrogen. Nathan, how much demand is there really around the world for hydrogen fuel at this point in time?
Well, it's continually growing. Like I said earlier, it's expected to be over an $11 trillion market. We have a hydrogen roadmap. We have a hydrogen center for excellence, and we have funded over 100 individual projects to the tune of over hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that we are advancing this and we remain a global leader as it's adopted more and more worldwide.
Are there certain countries that have come knocking on Alberta's door looking for hydrogen?
Lots in Europe, lots in the Asian market, Japan, and South Korea, pardon me. The United States is a great trading partner. All around the world, they're coming here. We have some very exciting projects with Linde and with Dow Chemicals. Lots more on the go. We are on the world stage, certainly.
Now, you are the Affordability and Utilities Minister. I want to talk to you about my last electric bill. Dude, it's not coming down. Let's talk about the electricity grid. And you say the province is doing more to make electricity more affordable for Albertans, but I didn't see it in my last bill. Talk to me.
Well, when was the last time you talked to your competitive retailer on what program you're on? What package do you have? I'll tell you, my last bill in Edmonton went down by 5 times. I was $165 for July. I was $33 for August. So if you are looking at your rates, the competitive retailers are doing a great amount of work. The average price for the last 4 months in Alberta has been about 2 cents a kilowatt. In our default rate, the RRO, which is soon to be the R roller, the rate of last resort, is down over 60% from last year alone. So I encourage you to go contact your provider and see what competitive markets you can find. The lower rates are there, and we're doing a lot more work this fall and into the new year to continue to provide that low cost and stable pricing for Albertans everywhere.
You know what? Yeah, I'm with ATCO right now, and I have to talk to them about the 12 cents per kilowatt hour that they're charging me right now. I think you should. I think that there's competitive rates much lower than that. I suspect you might be on that RRO rate. We'll continue to work with them on that, but check out what rate you're on. There's lots of options for you. So how much of an increase has Alberta seen in more electricity production coming on stream?
We've seen a tremendous amount this last year, over 6,000 megawatts by the end of this year from last year. So people remember maybe January 13th or some other challenges this spring. We've had over 3,000 megawatts of dispatchable natural gas generation come online, and many more wind and solar projects come online as well. This will provide more stability, a more balanced and broad-based generation supply. We continue to do work on that, and many more thousands are being constructed right now, including some battery storage, which helps stabilize some of that fast frequency response. I'm getting a bit technical, but our system is becoming more and more balanced with more and more stable pricing, and that's a good end result for consumers.
Okay, winter's just around the corner. It's going to get a lot colder here. What's the outlook looking like right now for reliable electricity and our grid so we don't have to borrow from Saskatchewan or Montana?
We're looking very, very good. We have over 13,000 megawatts of dispatchable generation on our grid right now. And our peak usage last winter, this summer, was 12,500. That gives us a lot of stability that no matter what's happening with our renewables, whether it's sunny or windy, we still have dispatchable generation on hand. And that's a really great place to be heading into winter. That's something that we didn't have heading into winter last year. So we're strengthening our grid, and we're realizing that potential. We're really excited about the future heading into next year.
Up next, there's a group which says it's fighting for parents' rights in schools. The group calls itself the Alberta Parents Union. We hear from the executive director, Jeff Park, who shares his concerns. According to Park, his organization has an update on the ongoing debate over students changing their pronouns or names, transitioning genders, sex education, and informing parents about these things.